David Grossman there. Well, joining us now is Stephen Wall, who used to represent Britain in the EU and advise Tony Blair on Europe, and Nina Schick from Open Europe, the body now helping to advise David Cameron, and you saw her colleague Mats Persson there earlier. Stephen, if I can start with you. UK immigration now, we know, at a 10-year high. The PM has a very tangible problem on his hands when he goes to Riga. Does any of this tinkering change what that figure could be?
He's not going to, as I agree with what Mats Persson was saying in the clip. If David Cameron were to seek to change the fundamental rules about free movement of people, he couldn't do that without getting a treaty change. Once you open up that can of worms, it's not necessarily going to end up to our advantage, because everybody then piles in with their own demands. But the thing that is obviously vexing people particularly is this issue of benefits, and there I think he can negotiate some change. There will have to be some give and take. You don't get everything you want. Our partners will be concerned, especially the partners from Eastern and Central Europe, that we're not doing something that of itself undermines their ability to come to here to work. But if you take France, for example, France has a problem with people who are benefit tourists, so there's going to be some sympathy for what he wants to do, and he's got an agenda, some of which will be quite difficult to achieve, some of it less so, which, if he does get it, will amount to a significant difference in the way the EU works. So
if we say that he thinks welfare benefit change is possible, the point that Daniel Hannan made is arguably he's gone knowing the things he can achieve, but not really asking for the things that he wants.
Well, I think it's very important that he sets out the reforms now, which is exactly what's happening. And then, of course, in the longer term, this is just the beginning of a process. If Cameron is successful in, achieving some of these reforms, then he has to tie that into a vision of where Britain is going in the EU and where the EU is going itself in its future. Now, coming back to the issue of immigration, I think it's really important to take it into context. So EU immigration accounts for just under half of net immigration, and the most contentious part of EU immigration are those EU migrants that come here to work in low-skill, low-labour-paid jobs. So by rewriting...
This is about his own target, though, as we know, and this is about what 4 million people have voted for in the recent elections for UKIP, controlling your own immigration figures. That's what's at heart.
Well, it's about making it fairer, so making the system fairer and thereby drawing some of the toxicity out of the debate. The other options which were considered and floated last year before the immigration speech was given, an outright cap on EU migration, would not be in line with the fundamental free movement principle.
And you wouldn't be recommending that he went in looking for treaty change for all the reasons that Sir Stephen's laid out, right?
Well, of course, at some point, these changes need to be embodied in the treaty. So the ultimate goal should be for the UK to have some kind of relationship with the EU where it's... the single market becomes the basis for the relationship. And this is not just about UK being exclusive in the EU. There are other countries that won't integrate to the degree that we've seen some of the Eurozone countries on target to integrate.
I wonder whether you think the other countries see David Cameron not as the threat. He said he wasn't greeted with a wall of love, but maybe that's disingenuous. Maybe he is the stalking horse for many countries that would actually like to see this reform, and they're just pushing him in first.
Well, I think there are some who will, maybe with an appearance of reluctance, go along with it. I mean,
that helps him, doesn't it?
That helps him. I think, though, it has to be said, in my view, that for them, for us, it's the top of the agenda, and we're forcing it to the top of their agenda. Left to their own devices, there are other things which are a greater preoccupation. Ukraine is a greater preoccupation. The Eurozone is a greater preoccupation. Migration from outside the EU is a greater preoccupation. So I wouldn't say anybody's going to welcome this negotiation, but some parts of the agenda, like less legislation from the Commission, which the Commission have undertaken to follow, greater powers for national parliaments, improving the single market. We still don't have adequate single market in services, completing the negotiations with America on a free trade deal. All those things will resonate with our partners.
And politically, Nina, what matters is not what he achieves there, you could argue, but whether we are convinced of it back home. You use that word toxicity, removing the toxicity from the argument. In a way, it's all about salesmanship.
Well, I think he absolutely has to push for ambitious renegotiation and reform. And I actually disagree with Stephen when one says that this is actually only in the UK's interest. If you look at the kind of 30 broad proposals that have been put on the table, they actually are not just for the UK, but also for the benefit of Europe. It's clear that the EU isn't working and something needs to change. And I think this is the opportunity, in fact, for that change to be instilled. And coming back to the public, they're not stupid. So if you just get some kind of token reform and you try and sell it as some big renegotiation, I don't think that will fly.
Okay.
And day 2, the issue will be back on the table.
Nina Schick, Stephen Wall, thank you very much indeed. Thanks.